Today I'm looking at my 2001 Dodge Dakota pickup truck. I was driving to work the other day and the check engine light came on and it started running really rough and was way down on power. When I got home, I hooked up my scan tool here and found that I was throwing code P0132, as you can see here, and right now that's the only code that's being thrown. As you can see from the blinking lights, not all of the systems are online, as I did reset the computer to see if the code would clear, but it didn't. So these systems aren't online, but this was the only code that was thrown before, so I'm reasonably certain it's just this oxygen sensor that needs to be replaced. And from the description of the code, the oxygen sensor that I need to replace is the driver's side upstream sensor, so that's the one ahead of the catalytic converter. Okay, the oxygen sensor in question is this one right here. The first thing I'm going to do is spray that down with some PB blaster just to kind of get everything loosened up, and I'll go inside, have some lunch, let that soak in, and then come back and get started. Before I try to remove the sensor from the truck, I decided to disconnect the wiring to the harness, and the connector is located kind of down behind this mess of wires and hoses right up against the firewall. And I found the easiest way to access it was to actually go under the truck, kind of behind the wheel, and then slide forward. I'm under the truck here, and you can see I've got the connector disconnected already. This is the sensor side of the wire and connector, and then up here is the wiring harness side. And originally this connection was tucked up behind this heat shield and kind of hard to see and get to. And once I started fiddling with it, I kind of was able to get it down here on this side of the heat shield so that I could get a flat-bladed screwdriver and kind of push the release tab on the connector and then work it loose. Once I was able to do that, this came out pretty easily, but kind of getting it down here was a little bit of a trick. I figured I'd show kind of how I oriented the wrench and everything. I've got a 7/8 inch open-ended wrench, and I was able to get it over the sensor kind of from down below the truck here. Well, my first attempt with the open-end part of the wrench actually failed. I didn't realize it at first. I thought it had cracked it loose, but it was actually stripping the hex. So what I ended up doing was cutting the connector. You can see the wires, or maybe you can't see the wires kind of dangling there, so that I could slip the box end up over the hex. And then once I was able to do that, it was able to crack the thing loose. So now the thing is actually loose, and I should be able to kind of back it off. In fact, it might even be loose enough to just back it off with my fingers now. Just for reference, here's the old one with the cut harness and the shield that went over the wires, the connector. And you can see here where I rounded over the hex with the open end of the wrench. So using the box end was definitely the way to go. This is the replacement sensor that I picked up at Napa. It's a Denso. Here's the model number, 2344654. And this is for a 4.7 liter Dodge Dakota with manual transmission. If you have other options, you might need a different model number. Check with your local parts store to confirm the part that you need. And you can see here, this is the harness with the connector and the sensor and a little tube of never seize to apply to the threads there. Here's the sensor with the anti-seize applied to it. That little tube is quite a bit more than you need. You don't want to put too much on here and get it all in the sensor there. It might foul it up. So I've kind of applied it sparingly here to the threads, and I'll go ahead and put this in the truck. I ended up putting the sensor in from the top here, as when I was laying down underneath the truck and trying to spin it in from the bottom, the wiring harness kept wrapping around the sensor, and then when I would let it go, it would actually back itself out and unengage itself from the threads. So going in from the top, I was able to hold the wire up and and kind of keep that natural spring action of the wire twisting around the sensor from backing it out of the threads. So it's in there now, it's just snugged up by hand. I need to tighten it with the wrench. I don't have torque specs for this, I'm just going to tighten it up by feel. That ought to be good enough. And then reconnect the connector. Back under the truck, I've got the sensor tightened up with the 7/8 wrench, so that should be good. I've reconnected the wire and I've kind of left it dangling here for the moment just so you can see how it routes. Now what I'm going to do is tuck it back up under this heat shield. I'll probably need to use both hands here sort of, but I want to try and get it so that none of the wire is touching the exhaust. You want it to come out of the sensor and go up behind the shield here and get the connector tucked back up under there, kind of like it was originally. Before I take the truck for a ride or even start it, I've got the key on, and I'm going to try and erase the code here. Okay, and that should erase any codes that were previously in memory. I'll give it a quick link to see if there's any codes thrown. And right now there's none, so we'll start it up and go for a ride. Okay, made it all the way back home. Was it 12.3 mile drive here with some mix of state highway and back roads and things like that, and no check engine light and no codes on the reader, so I think this is good to go. I guess time will tell a little bit here, but hopefully this problem is fixed. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this video was helpful.